For the first time this election season, we hear from the two candidates running for the Whitman County Commissioner race. Topics tonight will range from COVID-19 response in the area, the county economic recovery plan, land development, and more. Tonight, a debate on issues of key importance between incumbent Dean Kinser and challenger Tom Handy, presented by NWPB, the Whitman County Watch, and the Civic Scoop Pullman. Live from Pullman, Washington, on the campus of Washington State University, we present the NWPB Vote 2020 Whitman County Commissioner Debate. Now, our moderator for tonight, Matt Lovelace.
Hello and welcome. I am Matt Lovelace. This is Northwest Public Broadcasting's live debate in the race for Whitman County Commissioner between incumbent Dean Kinser and challenger Tom Handy, co-presented with Whitman County Watch and the Civic Scoop. Now, a quick explanation of the ground rules for tonight. The order which we begin is the order the candidates' names appear on the November ballot. Now, the candidates will alternate opportunities to answer first. The candidate who speaks first will also be provided a short time for a rebuttal. Each response is given a 90-second time limit, 30 seconds for rebuttals, and all involved will be able to see our countdown clock. Now, it's my job tonight to keep us on time, and I ask you guys to help keep us on topic. Now, I mentioned we're presenting this debate tonight along with Whitman County Watch and the Civic Scoop. Tonight, we're joined live by Allison Harris, who runs the Civic Scoop Pullman. Allison, very well connected with the city and county politics and does provide in-depth coverage of a number of community issues. Allison, thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Thank you for having me. I look forward to asking questions of the candidates a little bit later on.
Fantastic. We'll look forward to that. Now, tonight's questions, including what Allison brings us from the Civic Scoop, are a group effort. We also have submissions from Jacob Jones at Whitman County Watch. And we want you, the viewer, to have a say in this as well. Viewers, you have two ways to contribute to tonight's program. Go to NWPB's Vote 2020 page and select from the provided topics. You can also vote on Twitter. We'll combine those results and the top choice will be added to our list of questions for tonight. We'll actually do that twice. So for those of you following along, go ahead and vote now. We'll ask that first audience question here in about 25 minutes. Well, now let's learn a little bit about our candidates, beginning with incumbent Dean Kinser. Mr. Kinser in the District 2 seat on the commission. He won his first election for that position back in 2012. His time before the commission includes work on his farm and ties on the Pullman School Board. And the challenger, Tom Handy. Mr. Handy is a business owner in Pullman, running Paradise Creek Brewery. He's also a founding board member and president of the Downtown Pullman Association. Mr. Kinser, Mr. Handy, I know this is an unusual election season and really a debate tonight, but we really do appreciate you giving local voters a chance to get to know you both a little bit better. Now, we aren't going to ask you for traditional opening statements, so we begin just a little bit broader to allow you a chance to introduce yourselves. And for the first question, we'll start with Mr. Handy. Why do you believe you are the best candidate for this position?
Well, there's a number of reasons, but I want to thank you first for hosting this event, and thanks to everyone else as well who's watching. I'm honored to be here and want to introduce myself to those of you who do not know me. My name's Tom Handy. My wife and I moved to Whitman County in January of 1984 to go to WSU and have never left. We have always lived outside the city limits of Pullman and have raised 3 grown sons and have always known this as home. I have 2 degrees, one in industrial education from the University of Wisconsin and communications with a broadcasting focus from WSU. Upon graduation, I worked for WSU in the radio and television department, who is broadcasting this event right now. Over the 16 years I was there, I worked up to chief engineer and was project manager for several multi-million-dollar projects. In 2001, I left WSU and purchased the old post office building in Pullman, first opening a wine bar, and later, during the hard times of 2008, I changed gears and began Paradise Creek Brewery. When I opened the wine bar, I joined the Pullman Chamber and was a longtime board member with 3 terms as president. I was president of the Whitman County Business Development Association, headquartered in Colfax, and am currently in my 3rd term as president of the Pullman Downtown Association. I was a 2-term president in the Whitman County Craft Brewers Association and have been on the board of the Whitman County Historical Society, the United Way of the Blues, and the Historic Preservation County in Pullman.
All
that
right, Mr.
experience
Handy,
is
I'm
why
sorry.
I think I can make a great
We've hit our
commissioner.
time limit for this question. I said I have to keep us accountable and on time. You will get plenty of more chances to speak, but we do need to move on with our introductions and stay on time in the interest of fairness. So the same question, we move on now to Mr. Kinser. Why do you believe you are the best candidate for the position?
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank Northwest Public Broadcasting for hosting this and allowing us this time to get more familiar with our constituents out there. The reason that I would think I'm the best candidate is simply that I'm a member of a very good team of county commissioners right now, and we also have an excellent team of elected officials throughout the entire county, and it takes a team to do anything government-wise in the county. I don't want to break up a good team since we've got a good thing going. We've got several projects going right at the moment, such as the public service building. We're having to do some repairs to a floor that is sunk. Courthouse roof is needing replacing. It was at end of life and we were getting leaks down into the main building. The correction center has a need for new plumbing and lighting, which is going to be done, we're hoping, before the end of the year. We're implementing a new GIS system that was supposed to be done by the end of this year also, but COVID put a stop to that for a while, and it's getting cranked back up again. We're expanding a moderate risk waste facility out at the landfill site. And of course, COVID issues have provided a myriad of challenges throughout the county, and I wish I had invested in plexiglass because we're installing a lot of plexiglass for social distancing. And so those are some of the reasons why I feel I'm better suited for the job. Thanks.
All right, Mr. Kinser, thank you very much. And thank you both for those introductions. Now, we start our series of questions tonight following our debate format. Mr. Handy, you'll answer first here. You're first on the ballot to the following questions. Mr. Kinser will be asked the same question. You each have 90 seconds to respond. Remember, please, no interruptions. Now, following Mr. Kinser's remarks, Mr. Handy, you are allowed a 30-second rebuttal period if you so choose. Moving forward, we'll just alternate in terms of who goes first in that same process. And first, we're addressing, Mr. Kinser, you mentioned it, the topic on everybody's minds right now. Whitman County saw a surge of COVID-19 cases at the beginning of the school year at WSU, just as the students returned. At one point, a New York Times analysis listed Pullman with the fastest growing infection rate in the country. What could have the health department have done differently, if anything, to help prevent this? And what is the commission's responsibility in terms of COVID-19 response? Mr. Handy, you're up.
Well, it's really hard to say what can be done differently. Obviously, hindsight's 20/20, and you can always point back to things that you think could have been done differently. I think that the people that were making the decisions made some of the best decisions with the information that they had at the time. I think our health officials are very competent people, and they provided advice to the other people that were making some of the decisions to the best of their abilities. So it's really hard to actually say that anything could have or should have been different, because at the time that those decisions were being made, I thought people were making very reasonable decisions. With regard to the influx of students coming to WSU and the amount of infections that brought about, I think everybody really predicted that. I think that everybody knew that was going to happen. I think the responses to that were appropriate, and right now we're seeing a decline in those cases. So I think we're just doing the best we can one day at a time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Handy. And Mr. Kinser, as far as that COVID response here in the county, what do you think the health department could have done differently, if anything, to help prevent this? And what is the commission's responsibility in terms of that COVID-19 response?
Well, of course, I'm part of the health board in Whitman County. The three commissioners are the Board of Health. And we had discussed that thoroughly, that issue of students coming back. And we were pretty cognizant that we were going to have a fairly high return if they had face-to-face classes for everyone. And that was part of the reason that our health director recommended that perhaps they go to online school for everyone coming that was going to go to school this fall. And but we also knew in our hearts that people had contracts with apartments, and some of their other accommodations for building, and so we knew that we were going to have quite a high number. I don't think we could have done anything different. We were recommending that, of course, vulnerable citizens be isolated and taken care of, which I think the county did a pretty good job of that, and they monitored it very closely. So we had a very minimal number of exposures to our vulnerable population. So as far as what we could have did and our responsibility, I think we acted very responsible and took the action that was necessary.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Kinser. And Mr. Handy, if you have a rebuttal or anything else to add, you have 30 seconds for that.
No, I think everything's pretty on target for that, so I'm good.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Handy. And a reminder for our viewers, you do still have time to vote at nwpb.org's Vote 2020 page. Of course, I'm referring to voting not just in the election, but also for questions to ask of our candidates. Follow us on Northwest Public Broadcasting on Twitter as well. Now, the question we'll use in the next 5 minutes will be a topic selected by you, so be sure to get your vote in now. We'll put up a new poll after we ask your question, and then we'll do this again later in the debate. Well, this round will cover questions submitted by our candidates. This will actually be the first round of that. Now, we've asked each of our candidates tonight to provide a question they would like asked of their opponent. So here's how this one will work. I will read the question provided by one of the candidates. The opponent will have 90 seconds for a response. We're going to give the candidate who submitted the question 30 seconds following their opponent's response. Now, please, again, use this time to stay on topic. No interruptions, please. We understand these questions by nature can draw a little more heated debate during these debates. Now, the first question comes from Mr. Handy to Mr. Kinser, and that question is, what initiatives have you personally brought forward during your tenure as commissioner that have made the county's budget more robust than it was before? And how will those measures help us through the upcoming budget crisis and be better prepared for the future? Mr. Kinser.
Well, that's a good question, and I certainly appreciate that. As a business person, we all know that the responsible position to be in is to have at least 2 months of reserve funds, so in case there is a crisis of some type or an emergency. And so that was one of the proposals I brought forth. I recommended we get at least 2 months of emergency reserve funds set aside. We started off with basically nothing when I was elected as a county commissioner, and it took a lot of time because the county was not in good fiscal position at that time. And over the years, we contributed as much as we could to that emergency fund, and at the beginning of this year, we were finally able to get it up to that responsible amount of approximately $2.7 million, which is approximately 2 months worth of operating expenses out of our general fund. And that put us in a good position coming into this COVID crisis so that we did not immediately have to consider any furloughs or layoffs or freezes of salaries and wages. Those are tools that we're going to keep available to us. We may have to implement some of those tools later, but I think that was one of the more responsible actions that we took.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Kinser. And Mr. Handy, it was your question. You are allowed 30 seconds for a rebuttal here.
Okay. Well, I think that's a good thing, and I'm certainly glad that happened. I hope that 2 months or that 2.5 months worth of reserve is enough. There are a lot of predictions that this pandemic and the fallout from that's going to last an awful lot longer than that. I would like to see a little bit more growth potential in the county to not only bolster those reserves, but to add to them in other ways.
All right, thank you very much to you both. We will repeat that process here coming up later in the debate, where we will get a question from Mr. Kinser to Mr. Handy. But our next question of the night now comes from Jacob Jones at one of our co-presenters tonight, Whitman County Watch. Back to the COVID-19 topic and its impact on the economy. What do you consider to be the role or responsibilities of the Board of County Commissioners in providing small business or economic assistance amid the ongoing pandemic? Mr. Kinser, you're up.
Oh, okay. Well, appreciate that question too. That's one of the items that we try to promote in Whitman County economic development. As a matter of fact, I'm on the SWEDA board. That's the Southeast Washington Economic Development Association board. And their charge from the state is to go out and promote small businesses, help them out, provide resources for them. And in this crisis that we got ourselves into, we changed we did a slight pivot, and Southeast Washington Economic Association is providing, is the conduit, I should say, for much of the funding that is coming out to small businesses from CARES funding, and then they had what they called assistant grants before the CARES funding came out. We've got distributed in Pullman alone about $580,000 to small businesses, a maximum grant of $10,000. And in the rural areas, we've distributed nearly $240,000 to small businesses. We've been very proactive trying to help them out. As a matter of fact, SWEDA, we took $100,000 of our own co-pay money for when we got grants. We had to have not a co-pay, but matching funds to go with those grants, and we used it to bolster up some of the businesses that were having some real problems.
Thank you, Mr. Kinser. Mr. Handy, same question to you. I'll repeat it. An interesting perspective coming for you as a small business owner. What do you consider to be the responsibilities of the Board of County Commissioners in providing small business or economic assistance during the pandemic?
Well, I don't necessarily think it's only their responsibility, but I can guarantee you their help is certainly welcome. I'm sorry I don't see my timer on, so I hope I don't go over. But the Board of Commissioners has done a good job getting that money to SWEDA, which was under their purview. And SWEDA had maybe a couple of hiccups right at first getting things going, but that's now well underway. And I have to admit that I submitted an application for some of that money too. The businesses in the area here, the small businesses especially, are under a lot of stress to keep going. And there are things that are happening almost on a daily basis that make it more and more difficult for us to operate or to know what's going to happen next. So it's really important that we know that we can pivot and do different things as the needs arise. I think it's great that, like I say, that the county commissioners have enabled SWEDA to distribute some of the money from the Commerce Department that they got through the CARES Act, and making it a pretty seamless process. We hope that the distribution goes well and that the businesses are well served by getting that money.
All right, Mr. Handy, thank you very much. And Mr. Kinser, an opportunity at a rebuttal for you.
No, I, as Tom said, things are working fairly well. We appreciate the fact that we've got an excellent director at SWEDA that's doing an excellent job, and we're hoping that down the road, perhaps there's a little more funding coming our direction, but we also know that some of the larger businesses, hospitality businesses in Pullman, have been torpedoed by this crisis, and I don't know who's going to help them. We're looking for ways to do that, but we haven't found anything yet.
Thank you very much. And another reminder, our viewer question is coming up here. A topic chosen by those of you watching and following will be chosen to ask of our candidates. Your voice matters, so we want to make sure to address topics that matter the most to you, Whitman County voters. So get back on there and vote. We'll get to our audience question again in about 8 minutes. Now, the next question in our program comes from the Civic Scoop Pullman. Lucky enough to have Allison Harris, who runs that, for that. And we actually bring in Mrs. Harris right now.
Thank you. My first question is about generating new revenue. With current constraints on Whitman County's operating budget, for example, limits on tax increases or recent financial challenges that have arisen due to COVID-19, what are some of your ideas to generate new revenue for the county in order to maintain current service levels?
And this question is for Mr. Handy first.
Okay. Well, I think that generating new revenue is going to be the key to getting through this budget crisis and enhancing and bolstering that reserve fund that Mr. Kinser spoke to earlier, which is probably going to be pretty well stressed within the next budget cycle. We need to look at the number of people that are coming out of the cities due to the pandemic. We see that a lot of businesses are noticing that the distance working and the working at home is a real good thing, and people are being productive. I think that what the port is doing with connectivity is going to really be a good thing for the county, bringing more people out of the cities. What all this is meaning to say, we need to look at bringing more people in, propping up all of our cities, all of our towns, and making it a more desirable place to live. We can't really do anything with our own money except for spend it. We either have to pay more for what we're getting, we have to diminish the services we're getting, or we have to generate new income. And I think that one way of doing that is to grow the economy by growing the population of the communities.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hansey. And Mr. Kinser, I'll restate the question again from Mrs. Harris. With the current Whitman County operating budget constraints, what are your ideas to generate new revenue for the county in order to maintain current service levels?
Well, there's a couple of different avenues, and just to mention, the county was able to contribute $1 million to the port to help them expand their fiber to the different cities and towns in Whitman County. There are 16 different cities and towns in Whitman County. Of course, the ones close to Pullman are able to do better because they become bedroom communities for Pullman, but the outlying communities, they're really struggling at this time. And if we can get the fiber into those towns, they'll be able to run businesses from there as well as they could any place else in the world. Another probability is if we get really stressed at the county, we might be able to convert some of the departments into what we call enterprise departments. In other words, we charge fees for some of the services that we're providing so that it supports the department. We already have a couple of departments, particularly the solid waste department. That's what we call an enterprise department. We charge enough for a tipping fee for this solid waste out there to support that department. We also have, for instance, the building inspector for the county. We try to charge enough fees to pay for his position too. So that's another option. But yes, increasing the economic development in the county is a priority, and we've been trying to do that, particularly by supporting a full-time position in SWEDA, which provides those services.
And Mr. Handy, do you have a rebuttal based on that response?
I don't necessarily have a rebuttal, no. I think that a lot of things need to happen in tandem. We need to look at inefficiencies, not only in processes, within the county. We need to help cut red tape where that's suitable. We just need to make it easier to do business in Whitman County and in all of the small towns. I hope we can make it so that Malden wants to rebuild. It's got to, I would hate to lose another small town.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Handy. And thank you to Allison Harris. We'll bring her back, but Allison and really our community responsible for a number of really great and really insightful questions. It's a pleasure to be able to have her on the program tonight. Now our next question, another one from candidate to candidate. This time, this is the question Mr. Kinser has for Mr. Handy. A reminder, Mr. Handy, you will have 90 seconds. Mr. Kinser can use his 30 seconds after that for a rebuttal or a clarification of his question if he'd like. Now, I need to say this. My job as moderator, not to encourage, certainly not to pose questions we've deemed maybe accusatory, unproductive, but we do want to maintain the spirit of your question. So I've rephrased this a bit. Mr. Handy, Mr. Kinser highlighted the cohesiveness of the county commission. He did it in his opening statement tonight, also calling it the most competent and efficient team anybody can remember, expressing concern that if you win the election, that would break up that cohesion. How do you respond to that?
Well, I think cohesion is can be a good thing and it can be a negative thing too. If you, if everybody is just going along in the same way at the same time, doing the same things they've always done, and they want to just only support what the strongest member of the team wants, I think that we're not really looking at all of the avenues. And I don't mean this to sound like I'm not going to be a team player, because I can be a team player. And I think that collaboration and cooperation, not only amongst the commissioners, but amongst all of the towns and all the entities that they interface with, is extremely important. I think we need to just look at things, though. I think we need to take a serious look at a lot of different processes and make sure that things are functioning well. But on the other hand, I don't see that breaking up that team will do anything but maybe bring new ideas into light that may not be visible to the people that are there at the moment. So I don't think that it'll break it up at all. I think that the cohesion will be there and be as strong as it ever will be if I'm elected.
And Mr. Kinser, this was the question you submitted. You also did bring this up in your opening statements. Do you care for a rebuttal here?
Oh, I just would like to say that when we started as commissioners, Art and I, we were elected the same year, that the county different departments were somewhat siloed. You've got 12 independently elected officials. The county commissioners don't have authority over them. We're just charged with working with them. And we've been successful at breaking down some of those silos, and the entire elected official group, we're all working together well, and we've made a tremendous progress for the county.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Kinser. And now time for our audience questions, selected among a number of options on our website and social media pages. Now that question, Mr. Kinser, first here, what is your long-term recovery plan, and you've mentioned these, for those areas impacted by the local fires?
That's going to be a very challenging situation. Of course, there's different steps, and we aren't certain yet as to how long an emergency declaration will cover. We've got some challenges in that we don't know how many hazardous materials are out there that we're going to have to deal with. Of course, there's disposal of the debris, whether it be hazardous or not. You've got issues of trying to determine whether you're going to rebuild, whether things are going to have to be brought up to code. If you do rebuild, where's the money going to come from? A high percentage of those homes were not insured because when they changed hands, those folks were not able to bring them up to code, so the insurance companies would not insure them. And so we've got multiple challenges there to start with, and there's so many of them that it's going to stress the system a little bit. We're working in cooperation, of course, with not only local, state, and it looks like we've got a federal declaration now that's going to go through, so there might be some funding from the federal level. And of course, we've got Red Cross working on it. We've got multiple agencies working on it, but I think the coordination center is going to be out there in Malden, which I think they've got a coordinator right now, and it's all going to need to cohese and come through there and to be able to help all those people.
And Mr. Handy, just a few minutes ago, you had mentioned Malden. The reports out of there, 80% of the town destroyed. Not the only area affected by fires from the last couple of weeks. What is your long-term recovery plan for the areas impacted by the fires?
Well, I think, I don't have the firsthand knowledge that Dean does on this particular issue. It happened just a real short time ago, and he's had the opportunity to go and tour the areas and talk to a lot of the people where I have not. I think that it's going to take the will of the people that live there in part to want to rebuild and to want to continue to live there. I think that it's really important, though, that we figure out ways going forward that we don't lose our small towns. Malden and Pine City they're not big commerce centers, that's for sure. They are communities, though, that people have lived in for a long, long time. We need to find some new value for those towns and offer them something perhaps that would make people want to rebuild in those towns. Hopefully, the town services, the sewers and all of that, I know a lot of them are on septics too, that those are all salvageable. But it is just going to take the money to rebuild. And the unfortunate thing is, if there's not a lot of insurance money or that kind of thing, the savings from the people that live there probably aren't sufficient to do the job.
All right, thank you, Mr. Handy. And Mr. Kinser, do you have a rebuttal?
No, I don't have much of a rebuttal at all. I just wanted to point out that Tom is absolutely right. They do have a city water system out of Malden, but all the houses are on septic. And of course, we heard rumblings that they might want to unincorporate, which would put the responsibility of forming that water district on the county. We don't want to see that. We want them to come back and build and prosper.
All right, thank you, Mr. Kinser, and thank you to our viewers for selecting that topic. Good to know you're watching and participating. Now, this isn't the only opportunity for you to get involved. We will put up a new poll now. Go back to nwpb.org, follow us on Twitter. We'll ask that next audience question here in about 15 minutes. Now, the next question comes from the community as well. Actually, we've reached out this week asking for even more insight from citizens. One of these two gentlemen will serve. Now, this is an interesting one. I'm curious for your answers here. This race is being billed as county guy against Pullman guy. Now, this voter says as somebody who's living in the county but relies on Pullman for a number of things, it seems as though there's a huge us versus them mentality among their neighbors in the county. A resentment for Pullman without maybe the ability to articulate why. Why do you believe this exists, or do you believe this exists? And what has been done or could be done to mitigate some of these feelings? The first response here from Mr. Handy.
Okay, well, I just want to point out, too, that I have never actually lived in the city of Pullman. I have always lived in the county. So, the county guy versus the city guy isn't entirely accurate. But I have spent all of my working career while I've lived here for the past 35 or so years in the city of Pullman. So I guess it holds a little bit of weight. I think one of the biggest problems is really and truly a lack of good communication. I think there tends to be some mistrust. There tends to be some territorializing, where people think that, they're the only thing that matters. And this goes perhaps for both sides. I think, though, that with some good communication between the two entities and sitting down maybe with somebody new in the mix who's been a part of not only the county but the city goings on too, that maybe we can pull this together. I don't think it's a done deal. I don't think it's a lost cause. The city of Pullman and WSU have gone through similar things throughout the time that I've lived here, but it all depends on the leadership in both entities. And right now, the leadership in WSU and the town are pulling it together, and I think the county can do the same.
All right, thank you, Mr. Handy, and thank you for that clarification. You're not the city guy, but still, at least according to this voter, that perception still exists, this county versus city. Mr. Kinser, what's been done or could be done to mitigate some of these feelings?
I think it's going to be mostly communication. I think, I communicate and talk to citizens throughout the entire county often. Being a farmer, I speak that language. Sometimes agriculture is a foreign language to people, but we seem to have good communications with city leaders. We talk to Glenn often, Adam Lincoln. I serve, of course, on the Whitcomb board, which is was started by with an interlocal agreement between the city of Pullman, WSU, and Whitman County. And we've been working together well with that, I believe, and it's expanded. So, I don't think that I have seen too big of a problem with that, yes, there's occasionally comments made that one or the other is the economic driver of the county. The farmers out in the county, we're pretty proud of the fact that we're the largest wheat producing county in the nation. And of course, WSU is proud that they've got a major university, a research university that does extremely well and brings a lot of revenue into the area. But I don't think it should be adversarial in any way, shape, or form. I think we need to work together, and I think we're doing that quite well. So I don't really see a big problem there.
The feeling I'm getting is that you don't sense that same sort of county versus city rivalry. 30 seconds, so Mr. Handy, do you have a response after that?
Well, I think that there is a lot of sense of that. I mean, I'm kind of on the outside of it all right now, and I do hear a lot of comments. Some of them not so flattering, and some of them not so bad. But I think there's good room for improvement. Dean touched on Whitcomb, and I think Whitcomb is a scary situation that really needs some serious attention. That might be getting off the topic a little bit. I think we really need to take a look at where Whitcomb is.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Handy. And gentlemen, breathe easy. We're past the halfway point in tonight's debate. We'll move on to round 8 already in our questions. And for this, we bring back Allison Harris from the Civic Scoop Pullman. Allison, you have another one for our candidates.
Yes, thank you. My next question is about removing the dams. Removing the dams is a topic of concern in our region for many years, particularly in Whitman County and its residents. The county has several facilities along the Snake River. The farmers use the river to transport their grain, and there are many opportunities for recreation along the Snake River. The federal government recently decided to keep the dams in place, but this topic may come up again. So I'd like to know, what is your position on removing the dams? Do you support removing them, or shall they be left in place?
And this round, Mr. Kinser begins. Mr. Kinser?
Well, on that topic, I would like to make it perfectly clear, removing the dams is not an option in my book. When they brought those dams in, it brought slack water navigation to this area and provided a transportation source for our commodities that was much less expensive. The railroads used to have a spur into every little town in every county in the county, and so that was how our grain moved out of here. Since the dams went in, most of these railroads have been taken out. And if we were to put all the commodities that were produced in this area back on the highways to be trucked down to, say, Portland or further down the river, it would literally destroy our transportation system and the roads. So I don't think that's an option at this time. Like Allison said, it provides other important resources for the area in the way of recreation and sports. I am adamantly against removing the dams from the river and hope they continue to stay, because they've developed ways to get the smolt down the river so that they get to the ocean. But I think the main problem is out in the oceans and also being overfished.
And Mr. Handy, I'll turn that question to you. I'll restate it for Mrs. Harris. The federal government recently announced they are not planning to remove these dams, but this topic may come up again. What's your position on removing the dams and why?
Well, I agree with Dean on this 100%. My position was always, I've always been amazed that they would even consider it in some ways. I think that they're highly important, not only for moving our commodities, to market, but also for the power that they generate and the standard of living that they provide for all of us in the surrounding areas. Cheap hydropower is a luxury that most places in the world do not have, that we do. It was sad to see the aluminum plant go away. That was sitting next to the Dalles Dam, but that's not in Whitman County, of course. But But I was talking actually to another company, a startup company that's doing some research on hydrogen as a fuel, and in order to convert their hydrogen, they need access to cheap and efficient power. We can draw a lot of businesses into the area because of the fact that we have inexpensive power. So not only do they supply, a major conduit for our commodities to get to market, but the power prices that we pay, I would hate to ever see that go away.
And Mr. Kinser, sounds like you're in agreement, but do you have a response?
No, I'd just like to add to that, though, that we're also hyping up the wind energy and solar energy, but sometimes during the day the sun doesn't shine and also the wind doesn't blow, and our dams maintain that base load of electricity for the entire power grid. So taking it out of there would be counterproductive. They would have to use natural gas or some type of petroleum power to maintain that base load. So keep the hydropower in here, please.
And now we return to one of the questions provided by Jacob Jones of Whitman County Watch. The pandemic has resulted in many government agencies, including Whitman County, providing live streams of public meetings and some remote access to government records. Mr. Jones asks, do you support preserving this online access after the pandemic subsides? And what other transparency practices might you hope to adopt? Mr. Handy, this one's for you.
I think that this is open. I kind of touched on this a little while ago. I think that the pandemic and the Zoom calls or the Skype calls or whatever have really opened a lot of people's eyes to alternative ways to doing business. Now, the one problem with it has been, of course, that people aren't traveling as much. And so our road department, and Public Works is, suffering a little bit because the gas tax money isn't coming back because people are staying home. But I don't think that after this thing settles out, that people are going to go back to status quo as far as the way they do meetings, the way they, avert travel, and the openness with which, these meetings can be attended. I think it's a really good thing. I would love to see it persist, throughout time. I think, though, that in order for us to be really good at it and to be able to do it county-wide and in an effective manner, it goes back to that connectivity thing, which I think is so crucial for the growth of our economy and for all of our cities and towns.
Thank you very much, Mr. Handy. And Mr. Kinser, you've been a part of some of these meetings that are now online. Do you support preserving this online access after the pandemic? And what other transparency practices might you hope to adopt?
Yes, I do support this having online meetings. It's quite a paradigm shift for everyone, and it happened a little quicker than we wanted. Actually, at the Whitman County, we were discussing the possibility of doing that. Of course, I personally was not familiar with Zoom meetings. I'm very familiar now, but it has saved a lot of time. It allows a lot more people to see what's going on, and of course that makes the whole process more transparent. When I was first commissioner, we at a meeting, because the former commissioners who were very controversial, we'd have 5 reporters there from different entities, but as we progressed and we were doing quite a pretty good job of managing, we ended up we were getting 1 reporter at a meeting if we were fortunate. So we weren't being covered very well in any way, shape, or form. So a lot of people saying, well, we don't know what you're doing there at the county. And so this has probably been very good for what has happened around the world. And of course, it's cut down on a lot of travel that we had previously been doing as county commissioners, and saving the counties a substantial amount of money in doing that. So yes, I support this new shift in transparency.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Kinser. A rebuttal, Mr. Handy.
No, nothing more to add, really. I mean, I think it's the way the way of the future. I think it's here. I think people need to embrace it. I don't think it's going to go away. I think it's great that I can attend meetings even that I wouldn't ordinarily be able to attend. I don't have transportation times in between venues, so to speak. So I think it's great. I love it.
All right, thank you very much. And we're getting close to the end of tonight's program, but we do have another question from our audience, and that question is, what would you consider the county's most dire infrastructure need, and how would you address it? And this question from Mr. Kinser.
Okay, thank you. Our most dire infrastructure needs are probably maintaining our county roads. Whitman County has over 1,900 miles of county road that we need to maintain, and it gets to be challenging, particularly with our weather. That it can freezing and thawing. It's particularly hard on our roads. We have 435 miles of paved roads. We have 1,100 miles of gravel roads, and we have 400 miles of dirt roads. They're called seasonal roads. So, also another issue is Whitman County, people don't realize that we have 300 bridges to take care of, and they need to be monitored and inspected at least every other year. So keeping up and maintaining our transportation system is one of our larger challenges in the county. And as Mr. Handy mentioned prior, with the decreased amount of travel being done, we're expecting our gas tax revenue to be lowered substantially, and that's a major portion of what we maintain our roads with. So we've got some real challenges there, and we're looking at ways to mitigate that, knowing that we're probably going to have decreased funding.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Kinser. Mr. Handy, for you, what would you consider the county's most dire infrastructure need, and how would you address it?
Well, starting out infrastructure, there's a lot of county infrastructure. There certainly is. I mean, it's everything from the chairs that people sit in, to the roofs over their heads. But I agree too. The roads are probably one of the most expensive things that we have to maintain. Our roads, because of our great, farming community and the fact that we are one of the biggest wheat producers in the country, or the biggest. There are times of the year, like right now, where those roads take a heck of a beating. There's a lot of truck traffic going up and down them that non-agricultural communities wouldn't necessarily see. So our roads do take an awful lot extra work than they would. Like Mr. Kinser said too, we do have some bridges. We've got a number of them that are in need of repair. And the budget right now, the Public Works budget for roads is down $1 million this year right now, and they're expecting about $600,000 in shortfalls next year, primarily due to the lack of gas tax revenue. So, I mean, we got to do some good thinking. We got to, if we want to keep these roads in good shape, we got to come up with new ways of doing things or something. We got to put our heads together collectively.
And Mr. Kinser, a response or rebuttal?
Just quickly, I might add to that Whitman County is one of the few counties that do not divert road funds from our road department. Many of the counties in the state of Washington will take road fund money and use it as their general fund for other functions, and we don't. We made that decision up front that our transportation system is more important than trying to support general fund with road money.
All right, thank you very much, gentlemen. Believe it or not, we've answered 10 questions so far tonight, hoping to be efficient here on this debate. And our last question before closing statements, due to time constraints and the fact that this is an odd-numbered question, for this round, candidates will have just 1 minute to respond, and we will not have a rebuttal period for this. So just 1 minute, and Mr. Handy goes first here. What is your position on Whitman County's moratorium on new marijuana businesses? And what do you say to voters who think this moratorium just prevents our county from getting new businesses and new jobs that will instead be elsewhere due to a fear of cannabis?
Well, this is a kind of a tricky thing. People seem to either be for it or dead against it. But I don't think that, I think the moratorium is fine right now. But I think we do need to do some work to figure out where we're going to zone these things, how we're going to operate them. I mean, they are legal. And why should we discriminate against one farmer against another? I mean, should we be saying, well, we don't like garbanzo farmers because they create too much dust, during harvest? Or we don't like marijuana farmers because, the smell from the open air farms is something we're not used to and we don't like. I think what we need to do is figure out zoning. I think we need to figure out where we can put them, and I think we need to let them thrive.
And Mr. Kinser, really, this is a question a number of counties and communities are asking right now. What's your position on Whitman County's moratorium on new marijuana businesses? And what do you say to voters who think the moratorium just prevents the county from getting new business?
Well, it is a real challenging issue, simply because the marijuana industry, number one, according to state statute, is not an agricultural crop. They designated it as a non-agricultural crop. Let's face it, the odor offends people. It is very much like a skunk scent, and it actually makes some people ill to be around that odor of a growing marijuana plant. So it's going to be a real challenge. That's why part of the proposed code is that marijuana will be allowed to grow on a limited basis, but no odor can leave the property. If odor leaves the property, then they're going to have to quit growing it or have an indoor operation where they can filter the air to the point that no odor leaves the property. And they do have the technology to do that. A lot of grow operations are doing that.
Well, gentlemen, thank you both for answering these questions tonight. As I said, I was really impressed by the community involvement here. I think we covered a lot of good topics. Now, before we go, we want to give you both an opportunity to make a closing statement. For these closing statements, you will be allowed a minute. Now, first, Mr. Kinser, the time is yours for a closing statement.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much. Well, once again, I'd like to thank you for having us here and having this. I just wanted to say that I really enjoy the job that I have as county commissioner. I think we're doing an excellent job for everybody. And I just want to remind people that I did spend 16 years on the Pullman School Board, which gave me a tremendous amount of training to be in the public service, and have gotten 8 years on the county commission, which has been a lot of additional training. We're at a point now where our commissioners, Michael Largent, is going to be the chairman of the Washington State Association of Counties. And that means he's going to have a little extra time probably out of the county. Commissioner Swanek is probably going to be the chairman of the Legislative Steering Committee for WASAC, which is Washington State Association of Counties, and so they need somebody that's got experience to back them up. I have the experience, I have the knowledge, and I think everyone would be well suited to do so. If you wonder whether or not, I'm kind of an introvert, and so I don't like to talk a lot or be in front of people that much, but I think, or toot my horn. So I'd recommend, if you want to know if I'm doing a good job or not, please talk to the people I work with. I think they'll be honest with you, and you'll find out that I am doing a good job and should continue at it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I misspoke a second ago. We gave you 90 seconds. Mr. Handy, you also have 90 seconds for your closing remarks.
Okay, well, thank you very much again. I think there's a lot to do in the coming years in Whitman County. This year of COVID has turned things upside down and mixed them all around, and it's really hard to know what to expect from one day to the next. The fact of the matter is, though, that if we can't react quickly and read what writing is on the wall, we'll forever miss the boat. I think that new approaches must be discovered for the way we do things. We can't solve the budget crisis by being passive and relying on what we have done in the past. We need to always be seeking new opportunities and partnerships. We need to look at processes to make sure they are effective, but at the same time simple and straightforward. We need to find unnecessary red tape and eliminate it. It's sometimes hard to see your way out of a rut if you don't know you're in one. Now is the time more than ever to have a fresh look at things. Some with broad experience, customer-driven experience. This isn't just a once and done sales pitch. This is my pledge to you as a voter that I will continue to look for old inefficiencies and seek new opportunities. We're in a new age. We need to find new ways to do things. We need to do this together. Every city, every town, every organization, and every person. It will take the community. Let's make that happen.
Well, thank you, Mr. Kinser and Mr. Handy, for the very civil debate tonight and for answering these really informative questions we got from the community. We really appreciate it. I also want to thank our partners for tonight's debate, Whitman County Watch. You can get news about the Whitman County area on their Facebook page along with their website, whitmancountywatch.com. Also, a big thank you to Allison Harris from the Civic Scoop. Be sure to follow Allison on Facebook at the Civic Scoop. And meantime, don't forget Election Day is Tuesday, November 3rd. Still time to get registered. The state suggests mail-in voters should register up to 8 days before Election Day. That would be October 26th. You can find information about ballot drop box location at the Secretary of State's website. And just a reminder, you can watch the replay of tonight's debate on our website, nwpb.org. You can also catch the Washington State Treasurer's debate, which we did last week. That's up there as well. Thank you again to Tom Handy and Dean Kinser for joining us tonight. And for all of us at NWPB, thanks for watching. Have a great night.